Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, in the aftermath of what occurred in Dallas, Texas last week, one of the things that I think we need to get a grip with respect to being a nation and a people, is this identity politics scam that's being foisted upon us by the frothing at the mouth Fabians socialist leftists. They want us to believe that there is all of this rubbish and nonsense about white privilege. In other words, those people who have a lighter shade of skin color or skin pigmentation are subject to special privileges, as if they belong to a super secret club in which they are allowed to get away with almost any type of crime of moral turpitude or carry out anything that gives them a leg up that they don't naturally deserve. Of course, nothing could be further from the truth. None of us have really got a privilege, and when they try and talk about systemic and institutionalized racism, when you look at the natural law tenets that underpin not only our shared United States Constitution, but also our representative Republican form of government, you see that this is a bunch of hogwash. There's no way that that could come to fruition, and it's certainly not the manner in which our true national, or rather natural law-based system runs and operates. Of course, this is because so many lack a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of the Constitution, and thereby their fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. They don't understand the way that the system works is this whole notion that the United States of America is a nation of laws and not of men. In other words, equal protection under the law, which is guaranteed by the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, clearly states in no uncertain terms that the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours are meant to be treated equally, irrespective of their name, irrespective of their socioeconomic class, gender, or race. You see, that's the objective aspect of this government of ours, which has been the longest contiguous, uninterrupted, constitutionally endowed representative republic in the entire course of human events. Again, the graduates of Pavlov School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media and their lapdog friends in the Fabian socialist group as well just don't want you to know that narrative. Certainly, the historical revisionists don't want you to know that narrative either, because it tears apart their entire propagandistic goal and agenda to foist this foreign and alien Fabian socialist ideology and philosophy down our throats and against our wills. And they are doing it with the purpose of pitting American citizen against American citizen. There is nothing more intellectually disingenuous than what the left is trying to engage in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. But now that we understand that that is an integral part of what their messaging is and what they are trying to pull over our eyes with their diabolical and dark and twisted machinations, we can begin to combat it. But here's where there's a fly in the ointment. The presumptive gutless opposition party, or GOP, nominee, the New York billionaire, businessman, real estate tycoon, and all-around vulgarian, Donald J. Trump, also known as John Barron and also known as John Miller, has bought into the narrative. This is yet another repeated occasion where Trump has lended credence and credibility to the divisive narrative foisted upon us by the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists. It is sick, and it really has no place in an open and honest society like that of the United States of America. But, folks, I don't want you to just take what I'm saying here at face value. Certainly not when I have a soundbite that I'm about to cue up for you here that has the man going through this speaking about it for himself. And I'm going to cue that up right now.
Some black Americans who believe that the system is biased against them, the American system, because they're black, they don't get the same kind of shot, they don't get the same kind of fairness that whites do. What do you say to them?
Well, I've been saying even against me, the system is rigged. When I ran as for president, I mean, I could see what was going on with the system, and the system is rigged.
Yeah, but that's not going to lift anybody's spirits.
We have to fight.
If you say to black Americans the system's rigged, that's not going to lift their spirits.
No, what I'm saying is they're not necessarily wrong. I mean, there are certain people where, unfortunately, that comes into play, and I'm not saying that. I can relate it really very much to myself.
There he is trying to not only compare himself to black Americans when we already know that Newt Gingrich has come out and said that your typical white Americans cannot relate to blacks and cannot understand their situation and their day-to-day lives in a inherently racist country like that of the United States. It's all a bunch of hogwash. But you see that Trump, too, buys into that same line that's being foisted onto the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty by the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, that the entire system's rigged. It's all just rigged, and it's all unfair, and these people don't have a fair shake in life. Of course, I say that it's a bunch of poppycock because when you really think about it, the United States of America is the most open, honest, free, and equal society in the entire world. And the reason I can say that with as much confidence, conviction, and certainty as I do sitting here speaking into this microphone and conveying this message to you is because I know what the natural law tenets and roots of this representative republic of ours is. Stop and think about it for a moment, folks. Go back to the opening lines to the preamble to the United States Constitution, and you have what it is that America's really about. You have what it is that makes America tick, so to speak. And that's something that Donald Trump does not understand. Of course, that comes as no surprise when he was sitting there saying, in response to a question about how he felt the presidency should relate to the Article 1 powers of Congress, he said he was going to protect Articles 1, 4, 5, and 12. Of course, anyone with a modicum of sense realizes that Article 12 is not found within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. It is a clear display of his constitutional ignorance. And unless and until we start to fully address that and to realize that this is a major and significant hurdle and obstacle that he's going to have to overcome, we are still going to have these major problems. And folks, believe me, when I say that there are no signs of this improving at any time in the foreseeable future. And the reason that I'm harping on this and giving this so much attention is look at the narrative that's being spun by the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists who ultimately want to tear this nation apart at the seams. They are diametrically opposed to the fact that the people are the true ultimate wielders of sovereignty. And based on the post-Civil War amendments to the United States Constitution, blacks and anyone, everyone, are given equal treatment. It's the way that the system is designed. Now, I'm sure that there are those skeptical frothing of the mouth leftists who will sit there and say, yeah, but Randy, you see, it's not part of the original Constitution. At which point I direct their attention back to the clear and concise language contained in Article 5 of the Constitution, which provides, and I'm going to paraphrase here, it essentially provides that any amendment to the Constitution shall be binding and considered as part of the Constitution as if it was there when the entire document was originally ratified. And the same sentiment can be seen in the preamble to the Bill of Rights. So what we have here is the clear and concise language of our Constitution explaining how the system should be worked and how it operates. And what we get from that is a clear understanding of the natural law tenets that underpin not only our representative Republican form of government, but also our Constitution, which provides for our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights contained within the Bill of Rights, or the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution. The post-Civil War amendments were additions to those. So you have the 14th Amendment that provides due process and equal protection and allows that to be applied to the states. And it was already there anyway. It was just a restatement of that fact. Then you have the 15th Amendment with voting rights and the 19th Amendment with women's voting. So you see, there are already so many laws on the books, and certainly so many fundamental aspects of our shared United States Constitution that makes this diatribe and drivel from domestic left-wing terrorist organizations such as the Black Lives Matters organization just foolish, because there really is no way that they can say that the way that the law is now is racist, that the entire impetus and basis of our constitutionally endowed representative Republican form of government is based inherently on differential or disparate treatments of different insular and discrete minorities. In fact, if you look at the Ninth Amendment, you can see that the language of the Constitution, and particularly the language contained within the Bill of Rights, or those first 10 amendments, is not allowed to be construed in such a way as to disparage people. So again, how can it be an institutionalized racist system that it is systemically racist? It's not. This is a fairy tale. It's based on a form of academic philosophy called critical race theory. Now, critical race theory bases itself completely on subjective intent, subjective views, and then decries anyone who doesn't buy into the subjective intent. Yet, if you recall, the natural law is something that's objective. It's equally applicable at any space and time because by its nature, it's timeless. So that means that the principles and edicts and aspects that are found within the four corners of the United States Constitution are just as applicable today as they were 235 years ago at the inception of the United States, and as God willing, they will be 235 years from today. This is the aspect that they don't want you to think about. This is what they don't want you to consider because it goes against their twisted machinations. And their twisted machinations have no place in an open and honest society like that of the United States of America. This is the classic example, the quintessential example even, of the tried and true, albeit threadbare, tactics and strategies of divide and conquer being utilized by the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists. You see, going back to the words of Barack Hussein Obama when he was first vying for the reins of political power in 2008, remember, he stood up to the podium and proclaimed in front of the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media that we were 5 minutes away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America. And those of us who were conservative-minded understood what he meant. We understood that he wanted to redefine the United States, that he wanted to tear our Constitution, our natural law birthright asunder, and that he was going to do every underhanded, deceitful, dirty little trick that he could to go about accomplishing that goal. And then when he went out and said that the Boston police acted stupidly when they arrested that professor who was breaking into his own home after his neighbors, concerned for the safety and well-being of his property as well as their own, had called in this suspicious behavior. The police were doing their job. The police were acting according to their training and were protecting and serving the community that they swore to protect. This is not rocket surgery. You don't need Dr. Ben I'm a Victim Carson to figure this out. That is, unless, of course, you are a frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist or you are buying into their cultural Marxist agenda. And folks, that really is what it comes down to. It is cultural Marxism, pure, unadulterated cultural Marxism, an attempt to create a class-based system. Remember that Marx tried to frame everything in class. He tried to make the entire scope and course of human events based only on class and class alone. Of course, that's not true. It's just as it's not true when he said that history, by its nature, is linearly progressive. History, like human life, is cyclical. We go through cycles. There are rites of passage, sure. There are certain things within the finite existence or lifespan of a singular individual that are linear, but not everything. And that's one of the things that we have to keep in mind. Karl Marx was wrong when he tried to say that everything is linearly progressive. The human condition is naturally cyclical. We all experience the cycles of the seasons, the cycles of years, and what have you within our daily lives. And when one tries to say that the history of mankind is solely based on class and it is solely linearly progressive, it's ignoring human nature. And it's just as how Marx tried to say that when every nation becomes communist, all of the sudden government will simply wither on the vine and die. Again, that ignores human nature. It seems to act as though those who go forth and try to propagate the dictatorship of the proletariat are doing so with no ulterior motives. But that's not true. We can see it with with our own rather government and the way that corruption just runs rampant with it. Greed and corruption are going to be a part of any governmental system. It's the governmental systems that are best suited for addressing that and responding to that which can best serve the people. And again, that's not what Marxism does. That's certainly not what a Fabian socialist dystopia would do. But we see that with respect to Donald Trump here and buying into the Black Lives Matters narrative, he is giving them credence. He's giving them credibility where they really deserve and have none. And we have to be particularly careful and cognizant and wary of this, particularly when we see that people like Micah Xavier Jones go out and murder in cold blood 5 innocent Dallas area police officers for the simple sin of being born white and having the personal conviction and bravery to don the uniforms of their respective departments to defend and protect and serve their communities that they swore an oath to defend and protect. You see, we have gone so far in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and community of popular sovereigns of ours that we no longer go down the path of what is normal. We no longer accept that which is the natural order of things. And folks, that is entirely by design. This is what the Fabian socialists have been working towards so meticulously for the past century and a half now. And they are so close to their goal that they think they see a light at the end of the tunnel and that their twisted goals and objectives are within reaching distance. But we have to prove them wrong. We have to do that by standing shoulder to shoulder, coming together in solidarity and unity to send an unmistakable message, a message in no uncertain terms that says no. We will not allow them to fundamentally and irreparably transform the United States of America away from a constitutionally endowed representative republic to some sort of a Fabian socialist inspired dystopia. Because what they are trying to foist upon us has no place in an open and honest society like that of the United States of America. But the troubling aspect with respect to the presumptive nominee of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, is the fact that he will speak out of both sides of his mouth. Remember that all throughout the primary process, he kept reiterating in front of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media that he was the anti-politically correct candidate, that he was waging a war against political correctness. Well, folks, we've already seen that he's abandoned that with respect to the so-called transgender bathroom issue, and we see that he has violated his stance on the Second Amendment as well when he agreed to be a part of that no fly, no buy, and if you mention due process, we cry list, denying decent, hardworking, red-blooded American citizens of their fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, including the Second Amendment right to keep and bear firearms, and their Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment rights, but particularly their due process rights. This is what's so dangerous about what Trump is doing. He's essentially, as I've mentioned on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, the Pied Piper of disillusioned conservatives. He is using their state of raw emotionalism, which has been stoked and fanned up by the idiocy of the detente wing of the gutless opposition party and their tin ear when it comes to the true hopes, dreams, aspirations, desire, and consent of their base. And then also the ability that he's had to flood the open primaries throughout the primary process with Democrats who were just seeking to put forth the weakest Republican candidate to be the nominees because they know that Hillary could beat that. And not just Hillary, nerdface Bernie Sanders, before he decided to throw his unkempt hair behind Madam Clinton, would have also benefited from a Trump candidacy. And as my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, and I have so oft times mentioned, it's because Trump fulfills all of the stereotypical caricatures that the left attempts to define the right with here in America that makes him dangerous. He fulfills all of it. He is like this cartoon character that has no self-control, who just runs his mouth without thinking about anything that he's saying, and clearly doesn't give a damn about what's happening within the nation around him. That's a dangerous proposition. That's a position that the American people do not deserve to be placed in. And the fact that he says that everything is negotiable, and the fact that he also shows a complete lack of understanding and knowledge with respect to our shared United States Constitution, should also be sounding off alarm bells and sending up all sorts of red flags to the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. Folks, a messianic figure like Donaldolph Julius Caesar Trumpolini cannot save this country. By the very design of our constitutionally endowed representative republican form of government, he cannot. Our founding fathers never wanted power to be consolidated or centralized in the hands of a singular branch of government, entity, or person. Because if any one of those things claims that they can act on their own to save the country, is not the contrapositive of that true? Is not the counter of that true, that they could also possess the sole power and authority to destroy the country? It's important that we think these things through, because there are truly staggering and dangerous consequences that need to be taken into consideration. We are in a fight for the very soul of this country. That's why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, also reject any and all of the claims by the Lion Branch Trumpidians and anyone who tries to say that by refusing to vote for the mafioso quafioso, we are somehow voting for Hillary Clinton. No, we are not in support of Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is a detestable candidate. She is a horrific candidate, but she is a known evil. We know for a fact who she is, and indeed what she's capable of, and that means we know exactly how to combat her. But we can't combat her if we are going into the general election, which is slated for this November, with a stealth Fabian socialist candidate. And folks, the great weight of the evidence clearly demonstrates that Donald Trump is no conservative. In fact, the narrative of the Trump camp isn't even that he's trying to be. Remember, he said that he didn't particularly need or desire complete party unity, that it is the Republican Party, not the Conservative Party, and that he would be sending out overtones and reaching out to coalesce with the disenfranchised followers of the self-avowed Vermont socialist nerdface Bernie Sanders. Well, that's not going to do anything for us. That's not going to place America back onto the path to prosperity. Remember, folks, that socialism, by its very nature, is directly violative of the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of the Constitution. And 6 Clause 2 of the Constitution, any such position and any such system that seeks to have rule in this country is unlawful. Why? Because the Constitution itself is the supreme law of the land. If you really want to place the United States of America back onto the path to prosperity, we have got to return to strict adherence to the clear and concise language contained within the Constitution at all levels of government. Folks, it really is that simple. It's why Jeremy and I have so oft-times reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that the Constitution is the key, and that the key has been with us since the very inception of our nation over 235 years ago. This is the message that the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, along with their friends, the historical revisionists that have infiltrated all of our institutions of education and higher learning from coast to coast and border to border, as well as the frothing of the mouth Fabian socialist leftists, don't want you to know. They don't want you to be empowered, because that means that you are then capable of standing up to and rejecting their diabolical plot and machinations for this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. You see, folks, that's what we are dedicated to here at the Wright Flyer. We want you to be empowered. We want you to be able to stand up to these charlatans, these frauds, these hucksters, these con artists, these snake oil salesmen who are looking to strip and deprive you of your fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. And remember, if they are successful in their goal of stripping us of our rights, then we are left with nothing. That means that they can decide who gets to live, who gets to die, how we get to live, everything. They will micromanage our lives. That's why Alexis de Tocqueville said that any form or flavor of socialism is just a new age form of feudalism. That's what it is, folks. It's because they want to micromanage the daily facets of our lives. And they will stop at nothing to have that power. It's why I have so oft-times stated that the Fabian socialists and this rank and rampant corruption that is just plaguing the government of the United States is all about greed, power, and corruption. But ultimately, it's about power. Ultimately, that is what they lust after. That is what they seek. That is what they desire. But we cannot allow that to go forward. We cannot allow that to become a new norm in the United States. And this is why both Jeremy and I have such a significant problem with the quaff waffle mafioso quaffioso himself. because he doubles down on the rhetoric of the Fabian socialists. He accepts it and he legitimizes it when, as one who's claiming to try and make America great again, and we've already explained why that shallow, hollow, empty, meaningless platitude is just that, a meaningless platitude. How is he going to do that? By embracing those whose entire purpose in life is to destroy the United States as we know and love it. Well, that's the thing. Deceitful Donnie, the loser, is all about himself. For the vast majority of his 70 years spent on God's green earth, he has only ever cared about himself. He has only ever set himself about self-aggrandizement, never about anyone else. He had no qualms about stepping on anyone to propel himself to the top. And that's another reason why Jeremy and I say that you cannot run the United States of America as a business, because our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights cannot be treated with such contempt. Now, granted, we expect that from the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialists who have dominated the Democrat Party. But for the Republican Party, which is now the gutless opposition party, to abandon their platforms, their planks, their principles to support this charlatan, that should not happen. It's intolerable. And if you think about it, it is the one who lies about who he is and what he does that is more dangerous. In that sense, Trump is literally shrouding himself in the original iconography of the Fabian Socialist Society, which traces its origins back to 19th century Great Britain. Remember that their original iconography was that of a wolf in sheep's clothing. That way they could more easily infiltrate and move through the pillars of polite society and not just be outright rejected as some of the more militant Marxian type of socialists are. But when we stop and fully consider what it is they're doing, you have to remember that socialism is socialism. They have the same end goal anytime and every time. Folks, I'm going to be quite honest when I say that Donald Trump isn't alone within the rank and file of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, who's pushing forth this narrative that has no place in an open and honest society. Benedict Arnold Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, went in front of a CNN town hall meeting and said that we need to show tolerance to the anti-American leftist domestic terrorist organization Black Lives Matter. This in the wake of the slaughter of those 5 innocent Dallas area police officers. This is the sort of madness that political correctness rains down on this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and community of popular sovereigns of ours. It shows that they cannot differentiate or distinguish between good and evil, righteousness and wickedness. And that is exactly by design. That is what the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialists have been attempting to foist upon the American people for the past century and a half now. Unless and until we start to fully come to terms with this and admit that this is a glaring, open, and obvious problem facing the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, these conditions and the plight of America will only worsen. This is why Jeremy and I so strenuously argue that it is imperative that we all foster a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution, as well as our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. You see, by accepting the basics, the simple truth that forms the bedrock foundation of this representative Republican form of government of ours, it then becomes much easier to not only analyze and assess the problems that are facing us, but also to develop practicable, real-world solutions that will improve every one of our lives. Now, I know that that is always much easier said than done, and that with respect to the fast-paced modern world that we live in today, it is exceedingly difficult to have the time to focus and just afford to the study of the Constitution. But you know what's so great about the time that we live in? This information revolution that has been upon us since the development and emergence of the World Wide Web? It's that we have access to all of the information, all of the primary sources and documents and correspondence that was shared between our founding fathers so that we can look into it. Our smartphone can look up the text of the Constitution in just a split second. We can read the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers at our leisure. That's something that gives us a great advantage over any other prior generation. And I think we should count ourselves as fortunate for having that ability. It's also this great technology that allows Jeremy and I to come forth and produce these programs here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, for you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members. And that is why we are dedicated to bringing you this information, to shedding light on the truth, to assisting truth to shine through as it must by its very nature always do. But what's also a truly unavoidable truth with respect to this modern era that we live in, it's that far too many people have been led astray by the concerted efforts of the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists who are hell-bent on the complete and utter annihilation of the United States of America, both as a nation and as a people. They are not going to divorce themselves from their twisted agenda. They will not back down. They will not stand up for us. They will continue to use any crisis to push forward their narrative, their agenda. And what's so shocking about it with respect to the Gutless Opposition Party, or GOP, is that we see that the leadership of it, what I like to refer to as the detente wing, but what is most commonly referred to as the establishment wing of the GOP, always seems to just throw their hands up in the air and side with the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialists. Paul Ryan did it. His predecessor in John Boehner did it. Mitch the Turtle McConnell has done it repeatedly. At any and every given opportunity in which they could stand in staunch and stark opposition to this disastrous Barack Hussein Obama regime throughout these very drawn-out 2 terms thereof, they have capitulated. But what we see with Paul Ryan here, and this was covered in World News Daily, is crossing the line from mere appeasement and capitulation to sheer collaboration. He's collaborating with Obama. He is giving Obama the ammunition they need, everything they need to carry out their machinations, irrespective of the deleterious and detrimental impact and consequences that it has on the body politique of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. We see that he was on CNN discussing concerns of the Black Lives Matters movement, and he called for Americans to have more tolerance as well as more motivation to solve the problems plaguing communities. Well, it sounds nice, but what it's saying is that this entitlement, grievance-minded community, this domestic terrorist organization that is hell-bent on causing chaos, animosity, divisiveness, and derision to reign supreme in the United States, have some sort of legitimate message. No, they do not. The way to really go about solving the problems for the communities is something that we have reiterated time and again here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, dating back to the first time we took off over the friendly airwaves back on September 11th of 2015. The way we do it is we go back to the key. We go back to basics. I know that that's one of the lines that my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, always loves to use. Sometimes we just have to step back and objectively return to the basics. And the basics in the United States has always been the supreme law of the land. and that supreme law of the land is based on the natural law tenets. The natural law states that we are all equal, irrespective of our skin tone, our gender, and our station in life. But that's not what's happening with the Fabian socialists. When you see that Comey, with the FBI, is willing to allow Hillary Clinton to have a get out of jail free card simply because she's Hillary Rotten Clinton, that shows that the Fabian socialists are unraveling the societal fabric of the United States. And yes, folks, that is by design. As I sit here and speak into this microphone, that is truly what they are attempting to do, and it is what they have set themselves to so meticulously for the past 150 years. Now, I'm not speaking of them as some mere boogeyman. No, the great weight of the evidence is there to see. Don't just take my words at this for face value. I want you to look into this for yourselves, to empower yourselves to take the prerequisite steps to stand up for and proactively maintain, safeguard, and defend your fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. You see, that's the beautiful thing about being an American citizen, about having the rights and liberties and the privileges and immunities that we enjoy in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this constitutionally endowed representative republic. It's a beautiful thing. It shows just how much wisdom and foresight our founding fathers had when they came together 235 years ago and penned the greatest social contract or compact ever devised by the hands of men, yet divinely inspired by providence above. It is the longest lasting, uninterrupted constitutional document in the entire course of human events. But of course, the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media won't cover that. They don't want to convey that to you, and their allies in the historical revisionists who crouch behind their desks in the ivory tower of academia from coast to coast and border to border in the United States are doing everything they can to tear that down, to delete that, to eradicate that from history. Why? Because then they can replace it. They can rewrite who we are and make us more malleable, more docile, and more reticent in our acceptance of the governmental edict. And they do that by pushing this idea of an entitlement mentality. Everyone feels entitled to something, and it has to be earned off of somebody else's back. And that's part of what the victimhood mentality is. That is what Black Lives Matters is all about. That's why they're pushing for reparations for an institution that hasn't existed within the borders of the United States, at least in any official capacity, since the close of the Civil War, which was 151 years ago. You see, certain things they want to be stuck in the past. Other things they want to change just for change's sake, or at least that is the narrative they place on the surface, to make it sound benign, and of course to demonize anyone who would dare have the fortitude to stand up to them and say, no, you cannot trample upon my fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. It really is a twisted system that they've worked out. But they are so patient with it. They are willing to have a long plan. That's why their long-term plan has been slowly, through incremental steps, in the works for the past century and a half. Since the end of the Civil War, this is what they have been pushing. And it reflects upon the wily yet devious nature of who they are. And so this victim mentality is a central pillar of their incremental, fundamental, and irreparable transformation of the United States of America away from being a constitutionally endowed representative republic which recognizes the rights of the sovereign individual, first to a direct democracy in which a tyranny of a majority can be established, and then fully to a Fabian socialist-inspired dystopia. It's a horrific sight. It's not something that we want to ever come to fruition, in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and community of popular sovereigns of ours, because it is detrimental to the point that it will pit American citizen against American citizen and create a leech system that will vote for the very termination and destruction of that great experiment in representative government that was devised by our founding fathers based on the natural law 235 years ago. Think about the scope and magnitude of exactly what that means. Think about the breadth of what they are trying to establish here, what they are trying to foist down our throats. There really is a dark and twisted nature about what it is that they want to do, what it is that they are seeking to accomplish here, come hell or high water. And we must be cognizant and aware of the dangers and the threats and the risks posed by what they're doing, because it threatens to unravel us. It threatens to be our undoing. And it really comes to a head because what we see is that they are throwing off the mantles. They are so confident, arrogantly confident, that they have come this close to achieving everything that they've set their mind to, that they don't even have to pay attention to things anymore, that it doesn't matter anymore, that they know what's best and that they can do whatever they want because we have been so marginalized as an effective political force because we've lost so many election cycles that it's now too late for us. That's what they think. That's what they think in their heart of hearts and in their minds. But deep down, when we soul search ourselves, we know that's not true. We know that the truths which are self-evident by their very nature are that we, in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in the United States of America, are endowed by our Creator, the God of nature, with certain fundamental and inalienable rights, which are found within the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution, or the Bill of Rights. And it is such an amazing thing because it is truly timeless in its scope, its application, and its functionality. And that was by design. You notice that in the preamble to the United States Constitution, the founding fathers said that this was to be handed down to their progeny, to posterity. And when we think back to that statement that was made by Benjamin Franklin to that young woman who, shortly after the Constitutional Convention, went up to him and asked him, "Mr. Franklin, what have you given us?" To which he responded, "A republic, if you can keep it." That if you can keep it, that was not meant just for her. That was meant for that generation and all of the preceding generations which would follow it until kingdom come. Therein lies the truth about why our Constitution is such a powerful force. And yes, there have been many throughout this 2016 presidential election cycle, both on the left and the right, who say that the Constitution is antiquated, it's outdated, we need to update it, the system's broken. But those people are the ones who want to become something dumb. Those are the people that want to continue with the status quo of rank and rampant corruption plaguing the auspices of government from all levels. Those are the ones who toe the line of the frothing of the mouth Fabian socialists who are hell-bent on the utter annihilation of the United States of America, both as a nation and as a people. And now that we realize that, and now that we can actually point that out, it becomes all the easier to put your foot down and say, no, stop it, enough is enough. This country does not belong to you. Our foundational documents do not belong to you. They belong to we the people, the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty. Again, this is the sort of message of empowerment that the Fabian socialists don't want you to have, and that their allies in the historical revisionists and the frothing of the mouth Fabian socialist leftists don't want you to have. The graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media will continue to peddle the nonsense of an entitlement mentality, of such ridiculous notions as so-called white privilege. There is no white privilege. There is no black privilege. There is no flying, one-horned, purple people eater privilege either. Because the United States of America is a nation of laws, not of men. That is what we are intended to be. That is what we were designed to be. And that is also why the Constitution was able to be amended the way that it was, and that those clauses, those acts, which became part of the Constitution as if they were there when it was originally drafted and ratified, are proof positive that the system is there to apply to all of us equally. That's why at the federal level, any branch of government, any particular government actor for that matter, must trace their governing authority back to a power which is specifically enumerated unto them by the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of that magnificent document. Again, this is what the revisionists don't want you to know. That's why they try and sweep that under the rug when they teach civics, if they even teach civics at all anymore. That's why they try and rewrite the history of the United States to make it change into this laughable narrative that our founding fathers were just self-interested rich white men who were slaveholders, racists, homophobes, and sexists. That's literally how they want us to think about it. Because then you see they include those little magic buzzwords, those little magic elements and fibers of political correctness to make us turn off our minds, to make us stop reasoning and to just rawly emote. That's another reason why Jeremy and I have warned about being pushed to the point of rage that we become willfully blind, that we just want to see the whole thing burn. We have to stop and reason through this to see what the potential devastating and unintended consequences might be. And no matter whether the people who are pushing for this are doing it out of good intentions, that brings up the old adage of the road to hell is paved in good intentions. These realities, which really should be part of common sense, are there to stare us in the face if we are willing to take a step back and examine everything in an objective fashion. Objectivism, objectivity, what has happened to that? Why is that not a central pillar of the dissemination of information in the United States anymore? Well, as I mentioned in a Solo Flight Special Edition many moons ago about the rise of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, it's because they have a narrative. It dates all the way back to William Randolph Hearst and his newspaper conglomerate, where he invented the very notion of yellow journalism. There's power to be had if you can control the narrative. If you can dupe and deceive the masses to believe in something that will be a poison pill that kills them in the end, you can control the outcome and destiny of the nation. But that only works when your information is the only source of information. That's why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have proclaimed and adopted ourselves the title of the New Resistance. We are standing shoulder to shoulder in solidarity and unity with the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and community of popular sovereigns of ours, to put an end to all of those twisted goals and agendas which are about dismantling the United States of America and for all of which it stands and represents. But it is not an easy task. I know that what we say is not always easy to accept. That's why we say don't just accept what we purvey here on this state-of-the-art radio program at face value. We want you to delve into it. We want you to be empowered. Think about just how crucial of a message that is. Instead of saying that we want the government to care for you so that the government can decide your destiny for you so that you don't have to think, we want you to be free to make whatever choices you find are best for you, that best fit you, that best serve you. And in so doing, you also make decisions that best serve the community. The way that our founding fathers looked at everything was that government is ill-equipped to respond to even geographical issues, but to the various specific, particularized interests of the various communities that are within the United States. If you recall, one of the greatest impetuses behind the American War of Independence was this idea that the centralized authority, that of the Crown of Great Britain, was trying to dismantle the local authority of the local magistrates, the houses of burgesses, and other forms of representative governments that had popped up in the colonies so that the king could have absolute control. But not just the king, the centralized parliament. Now, they justified all of this with the notion of virtual representation. Even though the colonists didn't have a say as to who was selected as their member of either the House of Commons or the House of Lords in Great Britain, they were considered to be represented because they were called British subjects or citizens. But more so subjects because they served at the will of the king and parliament. You see, the great divider between what the United States of America became and what the Empire of Great Britain stood for was this idea of sovereignty. In Great Britain, sovereignty is the king with consent of Parliament. In the United States, it's our federal government and our state governments, but with the consent of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people who delegated certain powers and authorities to the government. Now, when power is delegated, that means if it is abused, that the other party is in breach of contract. That's why we say that the United States Constitution truly is a social contract. And there can be no question, folks, as I sit here and speak into this microphone, that the government, who is one of the parties to that sacred document, is in full breach of contract. And therefore, we the people must come together for a redress of grievance. Now, I'm sure there will be some who will sit there and say, but Randy is sitting there fomenting violence and calling for revolution. No, far from it. All we are calling for here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, is a return at every level of government to strictly adhering to not only the United States Constitution and the laws that are made in furtherance thereof, but also the state constitutions, which, by the way, cannot violate the Constitution either. You know, one of the great things about constitutional law, particularly when it comes to our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, the state constitutions cannot strip away the rights you have that are safeguarded by the clear and concise language of the first 10 amendments or the Bill of Rights to the United States Constitution. They cannot abridge those rights, but they can provide even more protection for those rights than the federal government. That goes to the true interrelationship and interworkings of a federalist system. Again, something that is not well taught anymore, something that the historical revisionists, the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists, and their lapdog allies in the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media simply do not want you to know. They do not want you to be empowered. They do not want you to be able to think for yourself, to take a stand for yourself, to be self-accountable and thereby self-determinate. Think about what the great weight and magnitude of that all means, and how this plays out on the scale of what is happening in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. Most of the problems, and I say arguably all of the problems which currently face the United States of America, can be traced directly back to a distancing from and departure from and divorcement to the supreme law of the land, which, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, what is commonly known as the Supremacy Clause, is the United States Constitution itself. That is a self-evident truth. Much as there are the self-evident truth that all men are created equal, and that we are all endowed by our Creator, the God of nature, with certain fundamental and inalienable rights, and that chief among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, so too is it a self-evident truth that when you back away from those, when you distance those, or you attempt to tarnish, limit, besmirch, or abridge those rights, and that proper, natural law-inspired system of government, that's when you start to see corruption. That's when you start to see chaos. And of course, on top of all of that, that's when you start to see anarchy as well. The Fabian socialists know this full well. That is the true objective of what they are seeking to accomplish. That is what they have dedicated themselves to for the past century and a half. And everywhere we turn, the societal blight that is currently gripping the hearts, souls, and minds of the sovereigns of this once great republic, and this once vibrant community of popular sovereigns, it is all directly linked to this incremental filth and poison and venom that the Fabians have been peddling so meticulously for so long. And when we stop and realize that that is part of the great magnitude of the cornucopia of problems facing the United States of America, then we can begin to realize the steps that are necessary to draw this nation back from all that which is detrimental, from all that which is deleterious and seeking to undermine this great system. We must be vigilant. And I know how difficult that is in this day and age. But it does not change the fact that we are obliged, that it is our duty, our obligation, and above all, our responsibility to proactively maintain and safeguard our rights. And that's why groups like Black Lives Matters, all of these people who are actually the forces of intolerance, who deceptively march under a banner of tolerance, must be stopped. They must not be allowed to have their way with this country. They must not be allowed to drive a wedge between the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, thereby making this country and the body politique of this country anemic and susceptible to the twisted sort of fundamental change that they are looking to foist upon us against our will. It's not some grand conspiracy either that I'm speaking of here, folks. This is there. It's there to be seen. And you can see it with the rank corruption that just seems to go through the gilded, marbled halls of government. That's why Congress hasn't been standing up for us. That's why the Supreme Court has not been making rulings based on the Constitution. That's why we continue to see the societal rot plague the United States. And that's why we are more divided now than we have been since 1860. That's right, the year leading up to the war between the states, or as it's more commonly referred to as the American Civil War. That is a dangerous position for the United States of America and her people to be in. But that is exactly what we are facing as I sit here and speak into this microphone, conveying this message unto you. But it's not all doom and gloom. It's not without hope. There is still hope. Because as long as any of us who are liberty-loving individuals are drawing a breath and are spreading the knowledge of our shared Constitution, as well as our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, then they have not defeated the idea. You can destroy a man. You can destroy a group of men. But you know what you cannot destroy? An idea. That's why the Fabian socialists will always be around. We will never fully defeat them. But we can certainly put an end to the twisted machinations that they have been foisting upon us for the past 150 years. We can put an end to the death spiral that is plaguing the United States. And we do that by holding those in power accountable, but also holding ourselves accountable. Also being able to look in the mirror and accept our own shortcomings, our own failings, but also to congratulate our own efforts. But what this really requires, when you look at the United States in a macro type environment, in other words, at the entirety of the circumstances or the totality of the circumstances, it means that we have to stop groveling in search for some sort of messianic figure to ride down on a quaff-shaped cloud from providence above to save us. The true saviors of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and community of popular sovereigns of ours is none other than we ourselves. If you want to see the saviors of this country, I suggest you take a look in a mirror, because it's you, it's me, it's all of us in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty of the United States of America. Think about just how empowering of a message that is. Think of just how powerful that message truly is and what it means for each and every one of us. And then think about why it is that the frothing of the mouth Fabian socialist leftists have gone to such lengths and to such extents to try and destroy everything that we hold near and dear in this country. Why they don't want us to ever be able to escape the sins that they claim cannot be washed from us. You know, like the original sin of slavery. The institution of slavery has been extinct in the borders of the United States for 151 years now. But they don't want you to think about it that way. They want there to be reparations. They want a grand redistributive scheme to be forced upon us, to be taken into heart here, as though that is the way that this country must go forth. That cannot be allowed to come to fruition. It simply cannot. Look, when it comes down to everything that they are trying to foist upon us, it all ties into this notion of complete control. That is what these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialists have always been about. And when Paul Ryan plays into their twisted little games and allows them to get away with whatever they want, it is really destructive. But it's not just limited to politics. We know that Seth Meyers is outraged that people are blaming Black Lives Matters for the Dallas shooting. And he says that people who think that just need to shut the F up. Well, here's a thought, Sethy. Go straight to hell. Just go straight to hell. Because what you are doing is peddling this vile filth of division and derision. You are the one who are empowering these forces to pit American citizen against American citizen. Well, enough is enough. We are not going to tolerate that any longer because it is so detrimental to the natural law tenets that underpin this great constitutionally endowed representative republic of ours that is the longest lasting, contiguous running in all of world history. All of world history. And it just goes to show that the narrative that they put out there is so disingenuous. It's so false. We know that there is an NAACP leader who compared black people to dogs being left in a cage to die. Oh, give me an ever-loving break. Maybe the animal rights activists should come out and demand reparations from those slaves who were escaping on the Underground Railroad for creating hush puppies. You know, hush puppies taste great. Great cornbread. Fantastic stuff. Do you know where it got its name? It got its name in conjunction to the Underground Railroad when the escaping slaves would put poison in cornbread to feed to the bloodhounds of the bounty hunters who were trying to track them down under the Fugitive Slave Act so that they wouldn't be reported. It would kill the dog. Now, where is PETA? Where is PETA demanding the reparations for these dogs? Since the NAACP wants to compare blacks to dogs being left in a cage to die, I thought that's what Michael Vick did, and I thought he was black, by the way. No, they should immediately pay reparations to all of those dogs that were killed. Except dogs don't have legal rights. Blacks do. They didn't during the Civil War, but guess what? It was, well, let me rephrase that. Slaves did not during the Civil War, but free black people did. But it was further strengthened by the post-Civil War amendments, your 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th amendments. Well, not 16th, but your 13th, 14th, and 15th amendments. The 16th amendment gave us the income tax, but the 15th amendment, that was your voting. The 14th amendment, that's your due process and equal protection, and the 13th being the abolition of slavery. But again, they don't want to talk about that as if that is a solid, concrete part of the Constitution. Then let's talk about the Civil Rights Acts. Did those not happen? Did that not occur? I thought it did. Of course it did. But they want to act as if there has been no progress made since the cessation of hostilities in the Civil War. That's ridiculous. It is a ridiculous and intellectually disingenuous position to hold. And then, the despicable thing that Barack Hussein Obama did when he went down to Dallas in response to the murder by that domestic terrorist who was affiliated with Black Lives Matter and the Black Power political organization, who took credit for this and then blamed cops and the police for their own shooting, for their own deaths. Folks, the Dallas police were there defending these turkeys' rights to sit there and protest. That Micah Xavier Johnson had targeted a Black Lives Matter protest, knowing that there would be a heavy law enforcement presence there. Doing what? Protecting them. These people honestly do not connect the dots. They're not even attempting to. They're attempting to use a propagandistic narrative to continue racial animus and division and derision. It speaks volumes about what the president actually thinks about the country and the people. and it's sickening. It grows sickening with each and every account where he selectively displays outrage and how he uses every tragedy to catapult his position of grabbing our guns as if that will somehow solve these problems. It won't. It simply will not. And it's insulting to think that, first and foremost, he can't even label the true threat posed by Islamofascism. He doesn't want to talk about the Islamofascists. But at the same time, the director of the Department of Homeland Security, Jay Johnson, in full unison with Salazar, the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist mayor of the capital of my home state, Austin, Texas, sat there and said that so-called quote-unquote radical right-wingers, and by that they mean constitutional compositionists, pose just as significant and just as great a threat to national security as these Islamo-fascist terrorists who want us to bow down to a medieval form of barbarism that has no place in an open and honest society like that of the United States of America. It's sickening, it's mad, it's twisted, it's intellectually disingenuous, but that is what they are doing. That is what they believe and feel in their heart of hearts. I would say it's what they think in their mind, but that would presuppose that these morons have minds. And that is a bridge I'm just not willing to cross at this point, because the great weight of the evidence seems to point to the contrary. But what does it mean? What does it mean that they can sit there and say that it's not racist and it's not about shaming to claim that there is this bogus hoax of an ideology like white privilege? You see, by being born white, they claim, that means you are inherently racist. You may claim you're not racist, you may consciously think you're not racist, but they know deep down more than you do. Listen to the arrogance in that. It's just dripping with arrogance. That's dripping with self-righteousness. And it's patronizing. It's patronizing not only to whites, it's patronizing to blacks. It's patronizing in that it says that no one has the ability to shape the world around them based on their own words, actions, and deeds. You know, what we would refer to as a meritocracy. No, merit means nothing. Skin color means everything. Folks, they are projecting on us. They are projecting their own shortcomings, their own twisted machinations onto us. That is the despicable nature of what it is that they are doing and the message that they are conveying, and it's why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have declared all-out hostility and war on the twin cancerous doctrines of political correctness and moral relativism. Moral relativism will allow critical race theory to try and cement itself, to try and claim a concrete place in the societal fabric of the United States of America. Because based on that twisted and dark and wicked ideology, there is no right, there is no wrong, there is no good, there is no evil, and then only selective religions deserve to have the free exercise and the protections of their constituents and of their congregation. That is where the United States of America stops being a nation of laws and starts becoming a nation of men. Think of it in the framework and in the context of these so-called hate speech laws and hate crimes. Hate crime and hate speech legislation is seeking to say that because someone says something about a certain group, that all of a sudden that warrants greater punishment. Folks, that is a bill of attainder. which is prohibited by Article 1, Section 9 of the supreme law of the land, our shared United States Constitution. That is a quintessential pillar of our entire constitutionally endowed representative Republican form of government. And again, this is part of this twisted diatribe that the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialists and their lapdog allies in the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media go out and peddle on a daily basis. They attempt to brainwash and indoctrinate the American people. And they certainly want to do that with the up-and-coming generations, and indeed those generations which have yet to be born, to ensure that the future prospects of a free, open, and honest society based on the natural law tenets will simply fade from this earth. This is why my first author, Rapington, and I, in the United States, is a fight for the very soul of this country, is a fight for the very continued existence of this nation as we know and love it. That's not an easy thing to admit. That's not something that we should relish in either. But you see, that's what the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialists do. And of course, they always come back and double down on their twisted machinations by trying to claim that, oh, Black Lives Matters is not racist. But if you say all lives matter, that all people should be treated equal, oh, that's racist. And you need to pay reparations for an institution that has been defunct in the United States for 151 years. Does that make any logical sense? Does that seem to follow the rules of common sense? And the answer is no. That's just a bunch of emotional drivel, all drawn and all designed to lodge a divider into the body politic of the United States of America, to drive a wedge between the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. It's all by design. It's all to push a narrative that is inherently false because it is based on a faulty premise. This is why Fabian socialism cannot win in a free marketplace of ideas. It's because what they espouse would be theft by any other name. What they espouse is divisive, derisive, it's insulting. But it's because deep down they do not believe in the fundamental and inalienable rights that are endowed to each of us in our capacity as popular sovereigns. You know, that's what it means to be a citizen of the United States. It means to have these God-given rights. It means that we, as a community of popular sovereigns, come together, standing shoulder to shoulder in solidarity and unity, to put down any of these attempts to fundamentally transform the United States of America away from a constitutionally endowed representative republic based on the natural law tenets to some Fabian socialist dystopia where we are all at each other's jugulars, attempting to destroy and annihilate one another. That's not good. And it's certainly not who we are, and it's certainly not the message that our founding fathers had, nor the intent that they had when they conceived this country 235 years ago. How is it that something that was conjured up all those years ago could still have relevance and meaning in this modern age? Well, the answer to that, as we have so oft-times reiterated on past episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, is the fact that our entire representative Republican form of government, and indeed our shared United States Constitution, are based on the natural law tenets, and that those natural law tenets, by their very nature, are timeless, meaning they're just as applicable today as they were 235 years ago, and as God willing, they will be 235 years from now. But because we are popular sovereigns, it means that we have to live up to what Franklin said when he answered that young woman. When she asked him, "What have you given us?" It was a republic, if you can keep it. Well, that means being proactive. That means being willing to face the consequences for your actions and to hold others accountable for their words, deeds, and actions. That is what the Fabian socialists have been trying to strip out of our national heritage, character, spirit, and identity. You want to think about what it is that really makes them want to take away the Southern Cross battle flag and all of the Confederate monuments across the South? It's not because they are quote unquote racist, as they like to claim. It's because, like with anything, they don't want the South to remember that they had rebelled. They don't want them to be able to claim that they should have been accountable for their actions and deeds at that time, because then, too, the federal government must be held accountable. And ultimately, that they, the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists, must also be held accountable for their deeds. They don't want that. They want to hold everybody else accountable. They want to point the finger at everybody else. But when it comes back to them, no, that's unacceptable. That is intolerable. That cannot be allowed to come to fruition. And it's why Barack Hussein Obama, when he showed up uninvited at that memorial for those slain 5 Dallas area police officers, wanted to blame the police and not that frothing at the mouth domestic left-wing terrorist. You know, Johnson, when you try and sit there and say that right-wing extremists, whatever the hell that is, poses just as significant and dire a threat to national security as the Islamo-fascist barbarians, it would be nice if you had some evidence to corroborate that. Because the way I see it right now, the great weight of the evidence shows that we have more to fear from the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists that are pitting American citizen against American citizen and are trying to destroy the very societal fabric of this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. The truth is there, open and obvious for anyone to see, so long as they are willing to look at it in an objective manner and fashion. And folks, I'm not doing this to fearmonger. I'm not doing this to further the waves of division and derision that are haunting this representative republic of ours. I'm doing this to empower us so that we can say, no, if you really cared about these people, you would pull for equal protection under the law. I'm not asking for anybody to be treated like a second-class citizen. But I am asking that we go back to strict adherence to the natural law tenets and the clear and concise language contained within the 4 corners of the supreme law of the land, the United States Constitution. But apparently that makes me a radical. That makes our founding fathers radicals too. That's what they want us to believe. That's what they want us to do. They want us to accept that, to hang our heads in shame as if it's white privilege. You know what? There is no white privilege. I know I've said that. You want to know what true privileges are? They're your privileges and immunities. And then there's your rights, which trump privileges. Notice that they don't want to frame it that way. Notice that they don't ever want to talk about privileges and immunities. What does it mean to have an immunity? It means you cannot be prosecuted for it. For an example, exercising your fundamental and inalienable rights in a way that does not infringe upon the fundamental and inalienable rights of your fellow popular sovereign, that cannot be prosecuted. That is what we would call an immunity. It's why we have the Privileges and Immunities Clause. Traveling, that's another one. Interstate traveling, not international, but interstate traveling cannot be prohibited. That is a privilege and immunity. And as our first air marshal pointed out on one of our previous episodes, traveling with your firearms, that should not be prohibited either, because your right to keep and bear firearms is a fundamental and inalienable right. And thereby carrying it from state to state as you travel, that is part of your privileges and immunities. Yes, folks, you see, it is very simple in its nature. It's the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialists, the historical revisionists, the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media that are attempting to rewrite it. They are the ones that attempt to add the layers of complication to it. But that's not what we're doing. We are dedicated to empowering you to foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of the Constitution, and thereby your fundamental and inalienable rights as well. And in so doing, you can be released from the web of deception that these frothing at the mouth Fabian socialists have been weaving for the past 150 plus years now. And think about just how empowering that is, because it gives you control. You see, with self-accountability, with self-determination, comes self-respect. That's something that's been lacking because of this well-orchestrated, concerted effort to strip and deprive us of our national identity, with all of the seeds of balkanization, with the tried and true, albeit threadbare, tactic and strategy of divide and conquer, that is the quintessential pillar of the Fabian socialist movement. That's what they want to get rid of, the national cohesion. But what is it that defines us as a nation and as a people? It's the supreme law of the land. It is the United States Constitution. And that is what we have to get back to. Because it is the divorcement, the departure, and the distance from that which has led us to the untenable situation we face currently as I sit here and speak into this microphone. So let's stand together in solidarity and unity and reject the voices that seek to divide us. And with that said, it's time for us to go ahead and begin our descent. I'm going to send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. I guarantee you, folks, she too knows about the Constitution and does not seek special rights because she's a flight attendant. They don't get special rights. As always, folks, I'm Randy Wright, and I want to thank you for flying the Wright Flyer. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to leave them here, either at our YouTube page or our Google Plus page or our Facebook page. And on top of that, I invite you to follow us at Twitter with the Twitter handle at Radio Aviation EX. One more time, folks, that's at Radio Aviation EX. And there you will find our departure board that lists my personal Twitter account, the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, our Blogspot account, which also includes audio blogs and is just chock full of useful information. And then there is our Cafe Press account, which has all sorts of trinkets and goodies from clothing, apparel, to laptop bags, tote bags, and yes, shot glasses and drinking glasses with our logo on it or our first class passenger logo on it. Folks, with such a wide array and selection, you are sure to find something that pleases you and comes in at a reasonable price. Go ahead and take a look at that, folks, for us and give us a little bit of support. Well, folks, we'll see you next time. Do take care.